If we continue to venture down the path that Australia is now venturing down, come mid-century, we will be a poor nation, we will be a weak nation, and we will be dependent on foreign powers.
Thank you for being here. It's great to be in Adelaide for this event. The last time we had an event in Adelaide was in the lead up to the Voice to Parliament. And I've got to say congratulations on the enthusiastic no vote and the refutation of division in our constitution. So very proud of that outcome. I am a born and bred South Australian, and I was very proud of my home state with the second highest vote in favour of racial equality. We beat the Western Australians, and I think that we could have got even closer to beating the Queenslanders. So a fantastic outcome. So I'm very much looking forward to this evening's proceedings. And to begin with, I will invite Professor Stephen Wilson to deliver his address. Thank you, Stephen.
Oh, thank you, Dan, for the kind introduction, and thanks to the IPA for the invitation, and for Ted for tolerating me standing up here before he gets to come to the lectern. And also thanks to our kind and gracious hosts here. Look, it's great to be back in South Australia. I was here just a few weeks ago in another small room. On that occasion, it was closed doors, Chatham House rule, and it was also talking about energy and specifically about nuclear energy. Just picking up from Dan's comments there on the economy and the situation we're in, I do think that we as a country are in a very serious situation. And I don't think it's widely appreciated how serious it is, and I don't think it's fully appreciated the role that energy policy is playing in the problems that we are creating for ourselves. I've called the current policies, the official policies and plans, a perpetual recession machine. It's a riff on obviously as an engineer, I'm riffing on perpetual motion machine. I think there's a parallel and a similarity between the delusion of the perpetual motion machine inventor and the people that are pushing these policies. We're getting away with it for a little while because we've been such a wealthy and successful country, but we won't keep getting away with it forever. I realised a little while ago, maybe a year or two ago, I was writing something on LinkedIn, and I wrote something and deleted it, and I wrote something else and deleted it, and I wrote something else and deleted it. And then I realised I was censoring myself. And then I decided I would do an experiment, and I would just say what I think and see what happens. And I expected to be blasted with invective and hatred and all these things. What actually happened was about 99% of the responses I got were positive and supportive. A lot of them from fellow engineers, not all of them from fellow engineers. And occasionally I would get a hostile response, and then what I usually do is I try to engage with that person and understand them and explain why my thinking is the way it is. And many times I've found I can actually positively influence people's thinking like that. There's only a very small minority of that small minority that maintain an unreasonable hostile position. So I fully agree when Dan says it's important that we fight, but I think in this debate it's really important to fight in a compassionate and thoughtful way. So what on earth is happening? Australia's main free market party has just announced its intention at the federal level, the states aren't quite there yet, to embark on a major exercise of central planning to establish a fleet of nuclear power plants in mainland Australia that the government would own and operate. And we'll hear this evening from one of the chief architects and proponents of this new policy. Meanwhile, the Party of Unionised Labour, which is historically associated with central planning and state ownership, is arguing for some version of let the market decide, while clinging to a ban on nuclear energy, which is not a very market-friendly idea. The federal nuclear ban was legislated in 1998 and 99. The bans are scattered across several acts, and there are other bans in state laws, at the insistence of the now extinct Australian Democrats. Some people in the media try to ban the Liberal Party and Mr Howard because they happen to be in government, but it was the insistence of the Democrats on the crossbench in the Senate that brought the ban in. So one might think that the extinction event for that party would give ban supporters pause, but apparently not. Today, the main environmentalist party is arguing strenuously for the retention of a ban on nuclear energy and complete reliance on wind and solar power, while remaining strangely silent on the devastation and fragmentation of the natural environment for thousands of wind turbines along the high ground of the Great Dividing Range, plus vast broadacre wind and solar developments stretching out across Australian farmland. I think Australians are just barely beginning to understand the scale of what is proposed here. That vast scale is the flip side of low energy density and intermittency. So tonight what I want to do, I just want to briefly unpack these ideas, give my perspective on where we are, how we got here, and where I think we'll end up, and give a little bit of wider context, some from North America. I want to link this in to the IPA research program on energy security that I've been asked to lead as a visiting fellow. And along the way, I'll make a few comments on technology, engineering and systems, and make a few observations on public policy posture, as distinct from politics, which good think tankers should always leave to the professional politicians, especially when they're in the room. My first phase of my own 35-year journey from anti-nuclear to pro-nuclear, I call that "No way, Jose." So I was ignorant and afraid. I was in year 12 at the time Chernobyl disaster happened in April 1986. And that psychologically affected my confidence in nuclear engineering. Gorbachev once said that the West underestimated the impact of that event on the morale of Soviet government and society. And to this day, that remains the only nuclear power plant disaster that has led to the loss of life. It's very important to understand that. Then while I was at university, the Berlin Wall collapsed, then the USSR and the entire Central and Eastern European socialist system collapsed. The West had triumphed, free markets had won. And the start of my career as a young engineer straddled the end of the State Electricity Commission era and the beginning of the era of competitive electricity markets. So the national electricity market today is about 25 years old. Let the market decide remains the official, I call it the official religion of electricity policy, but some serious cracks are emerging. So we don't have time for a discussion tonight on the incompatibility of subsidies for renewable energy and free markets. But these incompatibilities arise from direct contradictions in the stated objects of the governing laws. The Electricity Act of South Australia 1996, read the very first object. The Renewable Energy Electricity Act 2001, read the very first object. You'll see they are directly opposed to each other if you understand what they're saying. Now, it's striking that some of Australia's most notable libertarian and free market voices are thinking practically about the challenges we face. Electricity is a civilisational support system. And in and around the IPA, I've encountered well-informed, deeply thoughtful, practical conversations on these issues. In other schools of thought, in other think tanks, the thinking seems more patchy and less well-developed. There are a few well-informed individuals in the union movement and from an earlier Labor generation who understand the issues. And there are some people here and there in the environmental movement. There are a few people in large corporations and in the banking and finance sector here and there, in a few industry associations, some people in academia and some rare individuals in the civil service that are across these issues. But by and large, this new establishment view prevails. So I must emphasise that my comments here questioning markets are specifically focused on electricity. Okay, I'm not commenting generally on the economy as a whole. So let the market decide. These days comes in several flavours, most of which you've heard repeated many times in the media. Renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy, they say. The wind and sun are free is another favourite. So try plugging your computer into the wind. Try plugging your microwave oven into the sunshine. Steel, copper, rare earth critical minerals, silicon, fiberglass, concrete. These materials are not free, nor are they emissions free, nor are they coal free, nor oil free, nor are those materials easily reduced, reused or recycled. In contrast, we are told that nuclear energy costs too much, or nuclear energy is the most expensive form of energy. So this idea encapsulates the second phase of my personal journey from anti to pro-nuclear. As I came out of the no way Jose phase in my early 30s, in about the year 2000, I was in Hong Kong at the time, I thought to myself, phew, I don't have to worry about nuclear energy. The economics doesn't stack up. There is no business case. The risk-return profile is neither attractive nor competitive, and it's not bankable. Companies aren't interested. All the stuff we hear today, I was thinking that about 25 years ago. So what I would say today is those are dangerous half-truths. If we want to reconcile groups in society with divergent views on sustainability and on affordability, then we are going to need nuclear energy, whether we like it or not. More recently, I came into the third phase, and the headline of that is, I didn't know that. For example, I had been led to believe that so-called nuclear waste is a huge, unsolved, expensive problem. And then someone who actually knew his stuff, it was Tony Irwin, in about 5 minutes explained to me it's a tiny problem. It's the exact opposite. It's a tiny problem, it's fully solved and it's inexpensive. And that once used fuel is future fuel for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren because it can be reprocessed and used again. We're also told that nuclear energy takes too long, and there's two versions of this time issue. Number one is that the construction time, once you actually start building, the construction time is too slow. And number two is that the preparation time before you even get to start construction is too long. Now, I think the short answer to this is that the anti-nuclear people are exaggerating the issue, and you can look at the data from around the world. All fully available World Nuclear Association reactors database shows, reactor by reactor, country by country, design by design, decade by decade, and you can see how long it's taken to build all of those plants from go to woe. Construction time is an important issue. The risk does need to be managed, and the construction delays, if they happen, they always feed back into cost and they drive up costs. But we should approach this data in an open-minded and curious way, I think, as a guide to asking searching questions. And we should be understanding how Australia can best manage this risk, avoiding delays and avoiding cost blowouts. And we should keep in mind, Australia has built 3 nuclear reactors since 1958. The Haifa reactor and the Moata reactor have since been decommissioned, and the open pool Australian light water reactor, OPAL, has operated since 2007, owned and operated by ANSTO, the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation, a government organisation. That produces 20 megawatts of thermal power. It is small, but it's far more complex as a machine than any power reactor. And it was built on time and on budget, and it's one of the most reliable research reactors in the world. I was there yesterday, by the way. Now, does anyone in the room know, not you, Ted, does anyone in the room know where the vendor, which country the vendor is from that supplied that reactor? US? No? Yeah, Argentina. The prize goes up the back table there. Yeah, Argentina. INVAP is the name of the company. So I usually ask the engineering students, put up your hand if you think Australian engineers are less capable than Argentinian engineers. I'm yet to have a single student, Australian or international, willing to raise their hand to that question. The contractor was Australian, and throughout the procurement process, our Australian engineers and scientists acted as an informed and highly intelligent customer. So it's a real pity that our national technical capabilities are ignored and underestimated when they should be celebrated. What about the preparation time for nuclear power? So there's a variety of reasons are given why this is a problem. Lack of licensed designs, lack of technology maturity, governance, insufficient institutional capacity, political challenges, repealing bans, social acceptance, community attitudes, on and on it goes. And we've heard this just recently in a report from the Academy of Technology, Science and Engineering in the past week. I'm just going to make two comments on this. Number one, if Ariana Titmus or Jess Fox or any of our other gold medalists and Olympic athletes had that kind of negative, critical, pessimistic, helpless attitude that I see and hear from certain quarters on nuclear energy, not only would they not have won any gold medals, they would not even have been in the contest in Paris. And the second comment I'll make is that in May 1946, US Navy Captain Hyman G. Rickover was in a classroom of mature age naval engineers in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. He imagined it would be possible to control nuclear fission and turn the heat into power. And he visualized designing, building, testing something called a nuclear reactor. And he envisioned putting that in a submarine. And he assigned himself the task. That wasn't the president, wasn't the head of defense, wasn't the head of Navy. He assigned himself the task. He assembled and led a team that solved all of the engineering, materials, manufacturing, organizational, bureaucratic, administrative, political, and financial hurdles. And on the 21st of January, 1954, the USS Nautilus SSN 571 was launched. All that in less than 10 years, from complete zero. And about 700 naval nuclear reactors have operated since then around the world. There are currently fewer than 400 operating civilian nuclear reactors worldwide, not counting research and training reactors. So it's 70 years since 1954, and we are being told that Australia can't deploy standard pressurised light water reactor technology in 21st century designs faster than 15 or 20 or 25 years. So technology types, designs, vendor selection, that's one thing. Engineering project management, that's another thing. But what's even more important is a whole of system perspective. Electricity is not jam, just another market. If we ran out of jam and the supermarkets had none, it would be funny stories, there wouldn't be a Royal Commission. So that's at the crux of the debate that we're in, and it's pivotal that we answer this question. So where does the market end and the state begin? Where does the state end and the market begin? The wider power system, it is outside the self-imposed scope of the report recently published by the Academy of Technology, Science and Engineering, ATSE, on small reactors. But the question of whether the power system being proposed and described will even work and whether it's fit for purpose must be addressed. So I'm speaking of a system that's what's proposed, reliant mainly on wind, solar, batteries and hydropower with some gas peaking plant, with coal plants prematurely retired and nuclear power remaining banned. So to answer that question, will it even work, requires not only models, but a large measure of professional engineering knowledge, experience and judgment. It is more important than questions about large versus small reactors and the various design types and vendors. So this brings us to the matter of Australia's public policy posture, setting up the scene for TED. So our national energy posture is currently slouching, indolent and lackadaisical in my view. Our approach to the system is failing in all three big areas: reliability and security, affordability and economic competitiveness, and environmental impacts across the board. The environmental impact is featured on the cover of our paper, which the IPA has just recently published, called The Ruinous Cost of Free Energy. The photographer who kindly provided the image, Steve Nowakowski, lovely guy, and the people at the Rainforest Reserves Australia in far north Queensland are together. They're doing excellent work in drawing Australians' attention to the reality of what is happening up and down the Great Dividing Range. The cost issue is addressed in the paper itself, and in future papers we'll have more to say on how costs flow through into prices. The question of security is addressed in the framing paper which Mr. Abbott launched in Westminster late last year. That's called Energy Security is National Security. Strangely, there was no negative criticism or pushback on the energy security paper. The ruinous cost paper has drawn some attempts at criticism, and maybe that the title and the cover photo might have touched some nerves. So there's a lot of talk in Australia of what we can't do. I think we need a little bit more CAN, context, attitude and normalisation. I do believe nuclear normalisation is real. The rising generation has convinced me of that. And the rhetoric about risky reactors versus reckless renewables is live and running. It's important that objective reality must not succumb to poetic truth. In North America, especially in the United States, it is clear that nuclear energy is a unifying issue. It's one of the things that the Democrats and the Republicans that are at each other's throats on almost everything else agree on, because it can give everyone what they value. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And it's a great privilege and honour now to introduce Shadow Minister for Climate and Energy, Mr. Ted O'Brien. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you very much, Dan, and great to see you, Stephen, and good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for having me tonight. I've been very excited about being here, and maybe I can start by probably responding to where Stephen finished. So let me say very positively, I am proud to be an Australian. I believe we live in the greatest liberal democracy on the planet. And I believe Australians can do anything we set our minds to. If we are prepared to go after it, we can do it. I think the comments from Stephen and the comments from Dan earlier are spot on. There are too many in our nation, including, I believe, the current government, who have become apologists. They apologise for who we are as a nation. They apologise for our strengths as a nation. At a time when we really should be internationally brimming with pride, we should have absolute self-confidence in who we are and where we can take this nation. I want to thank the IPA first up. If you think of what the IPA's purpose of existence is, which is to preserve, to strengthen the foundation of freedom in Australia. And I don't think there's any more noble cause than that. If you think of that which does define us as a country, if you think of that which has the capacity to unite us, despite those who want to divide us, it is that we have a common set of values. And the value that is supreme, reigns supreme, is that of freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, freedom of association, freedom to pursue whatever it is you want to pursue in life. Freedom, together with other values such as equality, the fair go, define who we are as a people, and it defines our way of life. When Peter Dutton asked me to take on the role of the Shadow Minister for Climate Change and Energy, my first series of discussions with people, the number one thing that kept coming up was 2050, net zero by 2050. And can I tell you that then and still today, if we think of the challenge of decarbonising this country, we think about 2050. Personally, my mind does not go to emissions reduction. My mind does not go to the energy system. My mind goes to what sort of country we want to be in 2050, mid-century. I have small kids at home. When they're adults, what sort of nation will they live in? Will their peers live in? Will they enjoy the freedoms that we have been so blessed to enjoy ourselves? What will be their way of life? Now, the opportunities that face future generations, whether it be 2050 or beyond, does that have anything to do with the energy system? Climate change? What's that got to do with it? As far as I'm concerned, everything. Because how we take on this challenge will determine our future as a nation. So serious is it. If we continue to venture down the path that Australia is now venturing down under the leadership of Anthony Albanese, come mid-century, we will be a poor nation. We will be a weak nation. And we will be dependent on foreign powers whose interests and values, in many cases, are not our own. That is the path we are currently going down. How we manage energy is what that path delivers under the current trajectory. And that is because we are putting all our eggs in one basket. We are basically turning off our existing system and saying that wind and solar in particular can do the lot. Sometimes on intermittent technologies. Now, I think the average Australian, regardless of how much they talk or think energy, the average Australian knows something is not going right here. Because the government did promise Australians a $275 reduction in household power bills. $275 off your house bill. It's coming off. That electricity retail bill that comes in. In parts of Australia, Australians are now paying up to $1,000 more. 2 years later, $1,000 more. Over the last 2 years, every single week, we have had over 600 families, every week 600 families signing up for hardship arrangements with their electricity retailer. Every week, more and more and more. Never before has Australians been signed up to hardship arrangements like they are today. Prices are going up, households feel it. So too do businesses, which is why we have seen insolvencies triple over the last 2 years. It is why we are seeing major manufacturers close their doors, shedding workers, closing down our manufacturing capability that once gone from our shores will not return. And I know this because I'm sitting there and I'm visiting these businesses. I'm talking to major manufacturers who are basically looking me in the eye and saying, well, we're just waiting for the decision to be made. Ultimately, the board will make the call, but we can't keep it up because energy prices, we just can't keep this up here. And if you ask Labor, let alone the wacky Greens, why we're even doing this, they would say, oh, well, we need to have these punitive measures in place to ensure that we get emissions down. But of course, when you talk to these major manufacturers, where will your business or your operation go to? The number one answer you get is China. The second is India. And that's not a criticism of them, by the way. Emissions are 3 to 4 times higher in the manufacturing sector in India and China. 3 to 4. So hang on, why are we doing this again? You're multiplying the very problem you're trying to solve. You're collapsing industry, shedding jobs, regional parts of Australia under demise. Let alone then when it comes to reliability. And I think the average Australian knows this too because they listen to the radio, they listen to the news. Some of them have experienced blackouts. But we have the market operator, the ACCC, talking about the fact we're just running out of energy. Again, big businesses are shedding energy. a cute word to basically say, down your tools, folks. I mean, I found it really strange because I'm from a business background, walking into major manufacturing companies, and they've got a mini AEMO office with all the computers following the grid, working out when to shut down their operations, when to close shifts. I mean, think about that. We are asking our companies to be less productive because we can't manage our energy system. And that's part of the grand plan, apparently. As it stands today, we are forcing 90% of our baseload power, our 24/7, always-on baseload power, 90% will be forced out of the grid in 10 years. 90%. Meanwhile, we're suffocating the supply of gas. Investment is going everywhere now, but Australia. Why are we doing this? Because we can put all our eggs in one basket. So they say. But even on the rollout of renewables, well, that's stalled too. In order for Labor to achieve its 82% renewables target by 2030, they need to install nearly 7 gigawatts of new renewable generation every single year. 7 gigawatts. The financial close last year, 1.3. 1.3. They're not going to get there. So they're closing down one system before having another system ready to go. And don't get me started about what's happening in regional communities, which have been completely steamrolled over. Because apparently government knows best on this, and they just want to make sure they've got at least 22,000 solar panels installed every single month, 40 wind turbines, every single day, I should say, 40 wind turbines every month. Up to 28,000 kilometres of transmission lines, if you believe Labor's green hydrogen superpower vision, which of course will be a super flop. I think we know that. So with all of this then, why? Why is Australia going down this pathway? Because according to Albanese and Bowen, it's going to reduce emissions. But since they've come to government, emissions haven't even gone down. They've flatlined. They were 29% down on 2005 levels when they inherited government. Today, they're 29%. Why are they doing this? I mean, Stephen Wilson rightly talks about that trilemma. So prices fail, reliability fail, emissions fail. Often there's a tension between these three things. I mean, you've got to give Labor credit for one thing. They've aligned the whole lot of them. It just so happens to be they failed at all three. And so we have a serious issue with energy security in this country. And like many of you, I'm sure, in this room, I've had international experience. Much of my business life ahead of entering politics was living and working overseas. And I used to be across the table as a deal guy. M&As, JVs, all these sorts of things, right? International deals. The amount of times you talk about sovereign risk. Never in the context of Australia, though. I used to be proud that, I'd be doing a deal, it's between different countries. Australia often wouldn't even come into it, and I'd be thinking, when you talk about sovereign risk, Australia is never referred to in that context, because we're not a risk. And that's why so many of our trading partners rely on us. They pay a premium for what we have, because we're reliable, we're safe. Well, no more. And we know that's the case when, of all people, the Japanese, who are so respectful, so polite, to have the Japanese ambassador come out and explain that Australia and sovereign risk are used in the same sentence in boardrooms now in Tokyo. Why? Because of what we're doing, our interventions, especially on gas. When I was there in Japan, I was explaining to a group of energy experts that, yes, we're going to be shutting down 90% of our baseload power in 10 years. I spoke no Japanese, they spoke no English. They refused to believe the translator was getting it accurate. The translator wrote on a piece of paper 19% and showed it up to me. I said, no, 90%. Which, of course, the Japanese could not understand. And I couldn't explain it because I can't understand it. But you can see from their perspective, if we're so foolish as to weaken our own energy security, why on earth would we look after theirs? I mean, the Japanese rely on Australia for about 25% of their energy, a mix of coal and LNG. 25%. And they are the ones saying we have an issue with Australian supply. So we have an obligation as a nation to guarantee our own energy security and also that of our friends and allies. As a nation with abundant resources and capability, we have an obligation to do so. And that means, as we look to the future and we take on the challenges ahead, number one, we should not close our baseload power stations prematurely. Number two, we need to pour more gas into the system, and a lot of it. Number three, we need to be far smarter with higher quality renewables, because you don't need the maximum amount. You need to work out what the optimum level is required for your total system cost. And then over the medium term, when coal does retire from the system, it needs to be replaced with zero emissions nuclear energy. And so much as you may have heard the coalition speak about establishing a civil nuclear program in Australia, often the debate is about the 7 locations. What sort of power stations are we talking about? But again, if we are being true to next generations and we are thinking about what sort of country we want to be 2050 and beyond, we need to think more holistically and long-term about the potential for nuclear technology in this country. We already are a nuclear nation. We know that nuclear technology saves lives because of the medical isotopes coming out of ANSTO. We know that nuclear technology can protect lives because of our investment in nuclear-propelled submarines. And we know that nuclear technology can underpin livelihoods because we have the largest reserves of uranium in the world. This state here alone has around 23% of the uranium in the world. So when we think about our future as a nation and we think about building on our nuclear capabilities with civil plants, power plants, we also must focus on unlocking our reserves of uranium. We must look at the front end of the nuclear fuel cycle. There's far more we can do with value-added processing. So the final fuel that goes into power plants, we can have the sovereign capability to deliver. Now this is not some short-term goal. No, this is a long-term national endeavour, but one that absolutely as a nation we are capable of doing. And we must do it because as is often said by the IPA, by Stephen, following a meeting he and I actually attended together in North America, energy security is national security. They are one and the same. And as a nation, and therefore as a government, we have an obligation to ensure we are doing the right thing to secure our nation and to secure, therefore, our energy. There is no reason why Australia cannot develop the sovereign capability of the front end of the nuclear fuel cycle for civil plants. And that is precisely what we should be looking at doing, again, over the long term. And it's not just for us, it is also for the rest of the world. We know that the 32 economies today that are using nuclear energy are looking at expanding their use. There are another 50 nations in the world, 50, considering introducing nuclear energy into their electricity systems for the very first time, another 50. If you look at our own region, we already know the big players. We know Japan, China, South Korea, India, all have nuclear energy. But, I mean, right now, well, the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore, all of these countries are actively looking at introducing nuclear energy into a balanced energy mix in their countries. This is in our region. So what do we do as a nation when we have such resources, such capability? We've got a problem to solve ourselves on energy security. As our own region adopts nuclear energy, what is Australia just going to be some weak, passive bystander? One of the most embarrassing moments for me in this position was turning up to the COP climate summit in Dubai last year and hearing Chris Bowen apologise effectively to the world because we have so much gas. He committed that we bring an end to fossil fuels in our energy systems, apologising that Australia is one of the biggest users of fossil fuels. I mean, when did Australia become apologetic about who we are? We sign up to deals, sure, we deliver. We've delivered them before. That's not the issue here. The issue is a matter of self-confidence. It's a matter of self-belief. Come 2050, Australia need not be a poor, weak and dependent nation. If Australia is prepared to fix its energy system, openly embrace an all-of-the-above approach, establish a balanced energy mix by putting the consumer at the centre, taking a total system cost approach, then we can build industry, we can build sovereign capability. And come 2050 and beyond, we can be rich and not poor, strong and not weak, and fiercely independent, rather than captured by other powers. We are at a fork in the road now at having this debate as a nation. And those who believe in our capacity as a country to drive forward and advance our nation and not retreat, I believe will be on our side. It's based on economics, engineering, with a little bit of dash of moral courage and self-confidence. Thanks very much.